Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the first Earth Day, 1970. Uh, do you remember a lot of activity on campus? Was it a big deal?
Yes, it certainly was a big deal because Earth Day, 1970, the first Earth Day, fit very nicely with the initiatives that were being undertaken at UW Green Bay. Uh, Specific things that went on at the campus, I don't really have a very clear recollection. The one big recollection I have is what took place at the Brown County Arena. There was an event scheduled at the Brown County Arena which featured a geologist by the name of M. King Hubbard, and there was a person from the law profession, Victor Yannicani, who was at the event. There were 3,000 people. The newspaper reports tell us, I didn't remember that number, but there were 3,000 people at the Brown County Arena for the Earth Day event. And M. King Hubbard was speaking about oil, fossil fuels in general, but more specifically about oil, about the potential supply of oil. And he's famous for having studied the potential supply of oil, particularly in the United States, for quite a number of years, and he predicted that the supply of oil in the United States would reach a peak in 1970. And so he was talking about these kinds of things in a rather dry manner. He was not an eloquent speaker by any means. That's not to say that the content of his talk was uninteresting. But as he was speaking, a major storm hit the area and caused a lot of damage. Those of us who were in the arena didn't realize how much damage was done until we got outside and we saw damage that had been done to buildings, and telephone poles were knocked down, that kind of thing. But the thing that sticks in my memory, and in the memory I think of most people who were there, is that when M. King Hubbard was speaking, the roof of the arena suddenly developed a leak. So in other words, a portion of the roof had been, a small portion of the roof had been blown off, and then water began to come in almost on top of M. King Hubbard as he was speaking, and this somehow seemed to be a sort of a prophetic occasion when M. King Hubbard was speaking about environmental problems and issues, that suddenly the environment releases itself upon this upon this speaker and on the 3,000 people who were in attendance.
You remember student participation on that platform?
My recollection is that there was student participation. Now, the exact roles that they played, I don't recall. I don't have a clear remembrance of the entire program, but I'm certain there were students that may well have introduced the speakers and had some role. It was Ed Widener's belief that students should be involved in activities like this, so it wasn't exclusively an administrative faculty involvement along with the speakers.
And the attendees, they were the general population? They weren't just students that brought in?
Well, the students and university community, I'm sure, comprise the major portion of the list of attendees. But I'm also certain that there were members of the community there as well. Now, how many, how the proportion worked out, I don't have any recollection of that.
Now, M. King Hubbard talked about the end of the age of oil, or maybe the end of the age of fossil fuels. Do you remember, I mean, that was a pretty radical idea then, it still is now. What kind of talk was going on campus in the community, and did they say, did this cause a laughingstock, or did they take it seriously and say, wow, I didn't know it was that bad?
Well, again, I don't have a very clear recollection about the scuttlebutt that went on campus. I do know that back then, even among academic types, there was some skepticism about the predictions that M. King Hubbard was making. What we know in retrospect is that he was right on with regards to the supply of oil in the United States. And as far as my own response to what he was saying, I think there was a certain degree of skepticism involved in my own thinking. But I have done quite a bit of reading in recent years about the issue of the supply of oil worldwide, and one of the things that has taken me into is what M. King Hubbard wrote about the oil supply in the United States, and I have even applied some of his methods to, I shouldn't say that I have applied, but I've looked carefully at what some people have done in using his methodology in looking at the world supply of oil. And that has led to a lot of people to the prediction that the world supply of oil may be peaking about now, or maybe will peak sometime in the next decade or so. And I find that work to be quite revealing, and it seems to me to be quite credible.
Now, why do you think on his first Earth Day that of all the people that could be invited to UW Green Bay, that he was one? Was it just happenstance? Was there somebody on campus who was involved in that issue? Was it Ed Widener or any dean who?
Oh, I don't know who took the initiative to invite him. My suspicion is that Ed probably talked with some of the faculty on campus, or had some kind of a lead from his overall network about appropriate speakers for this particular event. And my guess is that it's out of that kind of framework that M. King Hubbard's name came up. I'm having trouble recalling how prominent he was in the news in general at that time. Most of my understandings about the work of M. King Hubbard are retrospective in terms of the things that I've done recently and looking back.
How about Yanakani? Now, he was involved with the DDT ban, which was in the news at the time, wasn't it? Their state and federal.
Yes, Yanakani he was an attorney, a member of the legal profession who was involved in legal activities related to DDT. And I do recall more clearly than for M. King Hubbard that he was quite prominent in the national scene at that time. In some ways, he was controversial in terms of his aggressiveness in pursuing legal approaches to DDD problems and so on. I don't remember much of what he said, virtually nothing at all about what he said at the event at the arena, but he was brought in because he had some prominence in the national scene at that particular time, I'm quite sure.
Okay, thinking of the students and the faculty, 1970, 69, 70, 71, what were the major things that got them excited? Was it DDT? Was it energy? Was it, you mentioned landfills, waste? Was there, there's usually like hot topics everybody's talking about.
That's a difficult question for me to answer. No, I'm thinking of students more specifically than I know population. There we go. That's one of the things that now comes back. Population, human population was a big issue that was discussed a great deal. Paul Ehrlich came out at that time with Paul and Ann Ehrlich came out with their book Population. What was it called? Population Explosion or something. That isn't the exact title. I don't have it in my head right now, but I remember I taught the second semester of LES, and population was a big issue among the students. Population Explosion, that's the title of Eric's book, I think, was a big issue among the students at that time. And when I taught that was probably 1970, 71, somewhere thereabouts, first, second year that I was here. So that's the one thing that I would mention.
And then interest in population or fears about it, did those recede? And if so, when was it like a quick spike and then over, or an asymptotic thing? Do students talk about it today?
Do students talk about population today? Well, I don't talk with students as much as I used to, and I have not had conversations with students about population issues in recent years. It's certainly the case that population issues are not receiving the same sort of broad attention as they did for a period of time back in the 70s, in my view. Part of the issue here is that Ehrlich and some people, some other folks, made dire predictions about what was going to happen 20, 25, 50 years from now. Well, 25 and more years have transpired now, and some of those predictions have not come to pass. And so a lot of environmentalists have taken focus off population issues and have gone into other things. And recently I'm seeing literature, articles suggesting that it's time to get back again and look at, raise questions about population. A lot of people seem to accept the projections of population, 9 billion people on the earth by mid-century, and ask how can we make adjustments in order to survive with that many people, rather than raising the question about population explosion itself, population numbers themselves.
Was it a big part of the curriculum, population it is? I mean, did every course teach about population?
Well, I wouldn't want to say that every course taught about population, but certainly it was a big part of the liberal education seminars. And back then, liberal education seminars uh, were part of the students' programs throughout all 4 years. In fact, every semester there was a liberal education seminar every semester. And certainly population was very prominent. Population issues were very prominent in liberal education seminars. And
Known as
was,
LES, wasn't the LES that used as a phrase to say that? LES?
Yes, LES is what I'm talking about. When I say liberal education seminars, the acronym was LES, of course. And I do recall that there were some specific courses developed at that time. Human biology. We had 4 theme colleges back then. One was environmental sciences, another was human biology, another was in the area of humanities, creative communication, no, that's not right, creative. Anyway, in the area of the humanities, and then a third one in the area of the social sciences. And in human biology, I do recall that there were some courses that were developed that focused specifically on population issues.
Were there some popular books that just about everybody read at that time? I mentioned the Population Explosion Ehrlich's book.
Paul and Ann Ehrlich. Barry Commoner was a very prominent environmentalist back in those days. I can't think of any specific titles, but Barry Commoner was prominent. Those are some that come to mind right now.
Let's talk. That's one last topic, and then I think I'll end it because I'm tiring you out. But liberal education seminars is talked about as a controversial and something that was later modified, almost eliminated. And go over your experience and what do you think happened there? Was it a good experiment? Did people misperceive it? Should it have been kept?
Well, I think liberal education seminars, LES, was something that a lot of students had a difficulty accepting as part of their educational experience here. They thought that it didn't focus enough on development of skills that would be useful in finding jobs after they completed their undergraduate program. And so later on then, LES was modified, and changes kept occurring. Finally, at the end, we still had the capstone seminar that students took in their senior year. And I don't remember the exact dates for how the changes that occurred, but the senior capstone seminar was the last to go, and so we eventually changed liberal education to seminars to general education requirements that are pretty traditional, much like other universities. And I still think that in terms of a liberal arts education, a liberal education seminars, LES, was a very good idea. It was a very creative idea. But it was said that the students were voting with their feet, not accepting the LES program as something that was important to their education. There were times, and again I have trouble remembering the specific years, when there was pressure to increase the overall student enrollment at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay. For budgetary reasons, we needed to get more students, and this was, I think, part of the reason why innovative programs like LES gradually moved out of the picture.
Okay. Well, this is good. Like I said, I don't want to keep you any longer, and there's only so long you can talk before you